Coca-Cola, Indian Motorcycle, the true American original.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nuga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 12, right here on Nuga Radio.
For your small business, ending the year the right way can set you up for success come January. No need to let end-of-year panic set in. Easy Books and Taxes can help set up your books or new payroll service so that you can relax and enjoy the holiday season. With 35 years, bookkeeping, individual, and business tax preparation, it's easy. With Easy Books and Taxes, you run the business, we keep the books. Call us today at 423-755-0821.
92.7 Nuga Radio.
Good morning. Beautiful people here in the city of Chattanooga. It's your girl Marie Mott with the Marie Mott Show. You know what it is? I'm taking it from the streets to City Hall, from City Hall to the mayor's office. Can't leave out the police department. From the valley low to the mountaintop, giving you guys a bird's eye view to what's going on here in the city of Chattanooga. Good morning, everyone. Woo! We made it to the end of another week. And as always, I'm so grateful. Myself together. Sorry. I'm so grateful that we made it to the end of another week. Another week of fighting back. Another week of getting things accomplished, getting things done. Another week of hopefully embracing someone and loving them. Another week to just be here on God's green earth. Somebody didn't wake up this morning. If you woke up this morning, you are blessed beyond measure. And I'm always appreciative if I wake up and I see the sunshine and we get to enjoy some fall weather now. Y'all know what it is. Marie Mott with the Marie Mott Show. If you want to call in number is always the same, 800-8949. If you want to call and chop it up with me. If you are tuning in via Facebook, don't be shy. Drop a comment, wave, whatever you want to do. Y'all know what it is. It's Know Your Rights Fridays. Yes, that time in the week where we get to talk about legal rights, how to empower yourself, your neighbor, your family, your church members, those in your social club. Come on. And today we're talking about this Know Your Rights Fridays, prisoners' rights. Oh, man. And why do I want to? Good morning, Arlene. I see you tuning in. Why do I want to talk about prisoners' rights? Well, coming off of a lovely event last night that I was a part of, I've been working with Caleb, which is a local organization that is starting a community bail fund here in the city of Chattanooga as a first step, an attempt of helping people, because I've talked about it several times before on the show when I've talked about never plead guilty, when I've talked about several constitutional rights, the 8th Amendment, the 5th Amendment, the 6th Amendment. When I've talked about several constitutional rights, we know that the system is not set up. The system is not set up for the benefit of those who are in poverty and those of color. If anything, the system is set up to take advantage of those in poverty and those of color. And so often what we see is that, did you know that more than half of the people who are in CCA Silverdale have not been formally charged with the crime? They are there because they are too poor to make bail. Too poor to make bail. And that is our 8th Amendment, that excessive bail should not be required. And how do we get to this point in American history where, like in my case, when I was arrested in January, it was, with the exception of my dad having a wonderful relationship because he works in criminal justice with this particular bail bondsman that bonded me out. He cut me a deal as a favor to my father. But if I didn't know him, I would have paid $1,000. My bail, first time ever being in trouble, $10,500 was my bail. Eventually was, of course, found innocent, charges dropped. Do you get your dignity back? You know, If you didn't have the money to pay the bail, could you get your job back? If you had to wait in prison until you could see a judge, is that not unconstitutional in so many ways? Absolutely, because that prevents you from due process. The only thing stated twice in the Constitutional Bill of Rights, due process. It prevents you from due process. And so often people are just so intimidated. They're so overwhelmed. And if you're poor, you're just in trouble. People often who are innocent are forced, legitimately are forced to plead guilty just so they can go home. And so Caleb is an organization just taking a first step, which is starting a community bail fund, which the goal is to bail someone out by the end of the year. Our goal is to raise $20,000. And in one night, with our opening up to the public, we raised $10,000. We're halfway there. If you're interested, please look up Caleb. We're on Facebook. That's CALEB, Caleb, on Facebook. If you would like to make a donation, please send them an inbox. Reach out to them. Reach out to Mark Gilliland. He's also with COA, Chattanooga Organized for Action. And so shout out to Caleb. It was a pretty packed room last night. And it was a beautiful thing to see months of hard work coming into a situation where we are getting started. And so I found it imperative to talk about prisoners' rights. First of all, because I understand that because of how we are taught in school, because of social media, definitely because of television. I grew up, who didn't probably grow up watching Cops? Your perception of innocence, your perception of crime, of guilt, your perception of the criminal justice system is often shaped by what you watch on television. Because unless you know a decent lawyer, and there's not many of them, unless you know a decent lawyer or a decent judge or just a decent person who's involved in any sort of criminal justice action, your perceptions of these things, if we're not taught constitutional rights in school, often the assumption of innocence, of course, is not something that we live by. And the public defender that spoke last night at Caleb from Nashville said just that often what are the thoughts that come to mind when we see someone pulled over and we see them being placed in handcuffs? If we look at them and we look and see that they're a particular color, if we look at them and see that they look particularly impoverished, then often we ask, what did they do? But when you're someone like me, a young African-American millennial that grew up in one of the most impoverished zip codes prior to gentrification in the city of Chattanooga, when you have family that's lived in housing projects the majority of your life, when you have friends and family that live even still in impoverished areas, then your perception is not what did they do. When you see people getting pulled over or you see a headshot come on the evening news, the question you ask is, I wonder how many charges did they stack on them? I wonder if they're going to throw them up under the jail. I wonder if they're going to get proper representation. I wonder if they have the money to bail themselves out. I wonder if they're going to go into the courtroom and receive any sort of justice. And so, because a lot of us, maybe not all of us, but I think because a lot of us, this is one thing that we have to understand. If the majority of people who are incarcerated right now in institutions that should legitimately only be built for the most violent of offenders, then we have a lot of innocent people in prison. We have a lot of innocent people who have been charged, and even more innocent people who have not even had their day in court. And so I wanted to do this show in particular because if we have innocent people behind bars, both charged, and we have innocent people behind bars who have never had their day in court, but they have to dress out, they have to sleep in a cell, they have to be treated as a prisoner because we have such a jacked up system, then it's imperative that they know their rights until they can either A, get proper defense to get themselves out of prison, or B, have their day in court. And so I want to take a look at this because when we look at the Eighth Amendment, and it starts with excessive bail and ends with cruel and unusual punishment, then the problems become, unfortunately, and I've seen this for myself going to CCA Silverdale, waiting in a holding cell. If I had not been bailed out, and it took them almost 11 hours to process my bail, if I had not been bailed out, I had already changed. I was already required the moment that I showed up as an innocent person who had not had their day in court. I was required to dress out in inmate attire, leave all of my clothes, shoes, and everything else, and dress out as if I belonged there. And if I had not bailed out, it would have moved me from that holding cell into a permanent cell. And so what are the thing that I witnessed and experienced in the holding cell was that nobody asked me if I have a medical condition. Am I diabetic? Do I take medicine? Am I allergic? Do I have allergies? Nobody offered me water, and no one offered me food. Not that I probably wouldn't have eaten it, but still. The most important above the water and above the food is that often there are a lot of people who have some sort of medical issue. And so if they're they've been transferred in the middle of the night, like I was, handcuffed, put in the back of a van, and carted off in the middle of the night, wondering if they're going to kidnap me. I had no clue. Nobody told me where I was going, what they were doing. Do we see how this works? This is a very dangerous thing. You're not a human being. Don't believe law and order. Don't believe cops. Don't believe the Hollywood, and don't believe it. When you go into these facilities, even though I know that I still have rights and I'm still a human being and I'm still a person, I still have feelings, I still may have medical issues, I may have a disability. That's a bigger thing. Nobody asked if I had a disability. You're not a person when you go to prison. You're a number. You're a number. What are the rights of people in prison? You have the right to humane facilities and conditions. You have the right to be free from sexual crimes. You have the right to be free from racial segregation. You have the right to express condition complaints. You have the right to assert any rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have the right to medical care and attention when it is needed. You have the right to appropriate mental health care. You have the right to a hearing if they are to move you to a mental facilities. So let's start breaking these down. The first one is quite hilarious to me. You have the right to humane facilities and conditions. Just because a loved one or a person you know is in prison does not mean that, like me, they should be placed in a holding cell with 6 other women and only maybe a 6 or 7 foot long concrete bleacher or concrete. It's like one bleacher is kind of what it would remind you of. And we had no blankets. We were freezing. This was in January. And so if you got a concrete room, you can imagine how cold it is. And then they had the air conditioning running, where many of us had to sleep with no blanket on concrete floors and on a concrete bleacher. And when some people found out that I went to jail, sometimes I have to do as Christ, God forgive them, because they know not what they do. They know not what they say. Well, if you went through that, you'll never go back, huh? Well, I was innocent when I went in, and I was innocent when I came out. Nobody had proven me guilty. I had not went before a judge. Nothing had happened except the officer placed me in handcuffs and charged me and took me to jail. That's not an excuse because people are in prison. That's not an excuse to shove 6 women, fragile, beautiful beings, into a holding room made completely of concrete with the air conditioner blowing in the middle of January. We're in the middle of winter. Often when we talk about pretrial detainment, the expectation is we're supposed to be placed in humane facilities. How is this even a possible situation in the city of Chattanooga when we're arresting and charging so many people? Depending on how crowded Silverdale is, there may not be any room for them to receive any more people because we're arresting so many folks. But further, if they have to try to keep people downtown, they will shove them in shower rooms and rooms that were never meant for holding human beings. But if you haven't lived these experiences, if you've never seen it for yourself, often people wouldn't know and some people wouldn't believe it. Just because you're innocent or even if you're guilty, you have a right to have a humane facility, meaning that in the middle of the winter, I should be receiving some heat. Or at the least, I should have a blanket. Inmates also have the right to be free under the 8th Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment. The term noted by the Supreme Court is any punishment that can be considered inhumane treatment or violates the basic concept of a person's dignity may be found to be cruel and unusual. For an example, an inmate held in a 150-year-old prison infested with vermin, fire hazards, a lack of toilets would exemplify a constitutional violation. Well, shucks. It wasn't that long ago we had an outbreak of hepatitis in our prison system here in the city of Chattanooga. Did we not? 800-8949 if you want to call and talk to me today. But this is important just because, and I'm going to, the more you say stuff, the more people at least will remember it and hopefully understand it. Just because you're in prison does not mean you don't have rights. You are still a human being. And to me, you're still God's child. Even the most heinous perpetrator has rights. Yes, indeed. You have a right to be free from sexual crime. An inmate cannot be subjected to sexual crimes, and that includes sexual harassment. And so that's not only from just the inmate population, that also is from the officers who are responsible for inmate care. The Prison Rape Elimination Act protects prisoners from sexual crimes, battery, and harassment. And so if you have a loved one who is locked up, who has experienced any of that, they have rights. They have a right to report that, the right to express a complaint. Inmates can complain about prison conditions and have a right of access to the courts to air these complaints. So if you have a family member, and this is a caveat, you should I'm hoping that you visit your family if they're locked up, at the least write to them. One thing you should do is go check on your family or loved ones in prison and see them in person. We're going to keep talking about it. Prisoners' rights, so Know Your Rights Fridays here on the Marine Mott Show. Y'all know what it is. Stay tuned for the second half of the segment.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
An inmate dies in custody. Officials say 54-year-old Carl Bray III was in jail on DUI charges. Shortly after booking, other inmates alerted guards that something was wrong. Deputies found him unresponsive in his cell. They performed CPR in an effort to revive him, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Chattanooga police arrested a man accused in a drive-by shooting from last month. Cops say just after the drive-by on Dodson Avenue, Cordell Young was pulled over for speeding. Cops say he was found to be in possession of drugs and arrested. Later, thanks to additional information from witnesses, police were able to charge him in the drive-by. And a 6-year-old Chattanooga boy has been diagnosed with acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM. The CDC issuing an alert about AFM, alerting parents that anyone who develops sudden weakness, facial droop, and other symptoms should see a doctor immediately. Little Spencer Hill from Chattanooga currently being treated in Atlanta. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News now.
Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 p.m. on Nooga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio 92.7.
Cash, and more cash. Get 8.1% return on your money. Rick Davis can turn your cash into real money. Gold and silver bullion. American Eagle Gold. The banks give you a measly 1.9%. At Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, you'll get 8.1% return on your money. 8.1% return on your money. Wow! Whether you're buying an ounce or 100 ounces, Rick guarantees it in writing. 8.1% Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
Even if you like your job, there are some things that can drive you nuts. Like the anonymous coward who steals your lunch from the break room fridge. Or maybe Tyler, the IT guy, who gives you that condescending look when you tell him that your computer is acting up again, as if somehow it's your fault. You put up with these clowns every single day. But what happens when you've had enough? That's the day you decide to retire. At least that's the hope, right? But will you be able to retire? Can you afford to retire? That's why you need to talk to Ron and Christy Adams at One Family Financial. They can't do anything about Cody, that moron who heats up fish in the microwave, but they can strategize with you on how to get the most out of your 401k or pension, how to grow your money without losing your shirt in the market, and how to help make your money last in retirement. Talk to Ron and Christy today about whether you'll be ready to retire when you finally had it with seeing Ethan walk out of the bathroom again without washing his hands. Gross. Call Ron and Christy Adams at One Family Financial, 423-710-2009, 423-710-2009.
I'm Bo Watson, and I approve this ad.
This is Hamilton County Sheriff Jim Hammond. In today's society, safety for our children, families, and others are critical. State Senator Bo Watson is working hard to make sure that safety for all Tennesseans is paramount to our future. This is why I'm asking for your vote for Bo Watson, a leader in Nashville that is working for us and safety for all. Vote for Bo Watson for Tennessee's future.
Paid for by friends of Bo Watson, Boy W. Watson III, Treasurer, votefortennessee.com.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga roofing contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust. Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need Amco Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. Amco Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that in here.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nooga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 12, right here on Nooga Radio.
Nooga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Looking good for your afternoon with mostly sunny skies, warmer highs into the lower 70s. Tonight, clouds quickly thickening. Some showers after midnight, lows upper 50s. Morning showers Saturday will give way to drier and cooler weather for the afternoon, highs into the 60s. Sunny, breezy, and chilly Sunday. Looking to buy or sell a home? Real Living Southern Realty provides real answers and customized marketing solutions. Serving the entire tri-state area, check rlsouthernrealty.com for their complete listings. And I'm Sorgene 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore.
Nooga Radio 92.7.
What's going on, everybody? It's your girl, Marie Mott with the Marie Mott Show. And it's Know Your Rights Friday. And today we're talking about prisoners' rights and why. Because half of the people who are even in core civic right now have not been found guilty. Oh my goodness. What if they don't know their rights? I had to talk about it. If you're just now tuning in, last night was an event with Kayla, which is a local organization that started here. What's going on, Big Guru? I see you tuning in. That started as a first level step of trying to push people to end cash bail here in the state of Tennessee. That needs to be a very, very large goal for us if we want to talk about leaders in the future. Ending cash bail is a system that we really need to abolish. Why? Because it targets people who are impoverished and people who are of color. And if we have a situation where half of the people in Silverdale are not guilty of a crime because they have not been charged, they have not had their day in court, we are preventing people not only from living their daily life, we are encouraging people to lose their jobs. If they're already poor, they're going to lose what little breadwinning power that they have. They're already poor. It's a possibility, especially if you come from neighborhoods like I come from, where the majority of households are single parent led, where people are going to lose their children. I've had Shamika Burt here on the show, and David had her on the show just the other day, lost all of her children. And so if you can't fight one case, how are you going to get your children back too if they get taken away from you because you're locked up, not because you're guilty, but because you're poor? You see, all of this is truly unconstitutional. And then when I think about the season that we're in, voting season, I didn't even think about this before the show. If we have innocent people, some who've never been in trouble, those that's never been charged with a felony, we're preventing people from having the right to vote and determine leadership for their community. good people, whether you're listening in Chattanooga or you're listening somewhere else, East Ridge, wherever you are, I want you to stop and think about where we are in this country and where we are in this city. Oh, man, we got Mike Steele. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
This is probably one of the most important topics you could talk about, because your freedom being taken away is taken so seriously by the Supreme Court that they say you need an attorney. They don't like it. When the Constitution talks about reasonable and unreasonable, it's based on the individual. In other words, if you're a rich man, $1,000 bail is nothing. But if you're poor, $100 bail is a lot. And that is not equal justice, equal protection under the law. Because, Marie, the reason why the founders wanted that, and I think you addressed it, is so you can prepare your defense.
Yes.
Accused doesn't mean guilty.
That's right.
There are people that have been accused with eyewitness, and then they say, well, that wasn't the person. The people in jail. We must assume, we must believe that that person is innocent until proven otherwise. And you cannot prepare your defense while you're sitting behind bars.
That is absolutely correct. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you chopping it up with me. You guys. Oh, so let's go back, because I know I've covered them, but it's hard to talk about these topics without going back to the Constitution. Because all of this, I'm telling you, the founding fathers had every intention of us, we the people, you the individual, of compelling you to understand your individual civil liberties and rights. And why? Because I think they had already understood, because how difficult it was to craft the Constitution. You see, these gentlemen like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, these guys didn't have an easy job of even trying to write the Constitution. And in some ways, they had to make compromises, because people, even in those days, back in the 1700s, were afraid. I truly believe that if people understood their God-given right, that it's not even the men who crafted this Constitution, but it is God who gives us these rights. Why? Because we're here. I think just a reiteration of what we should already know is, just in case we ever forget, there's a document that we can always go back to say, aha, this is my defense. My programmer tells me all the time, Marie, you only got two things. You got the Bible and the Constitution. Nothing else matters. Well, sir, I appreciate you, because it's the truth. I can't compel men. I can't bind men down for mischief. Sometimes even with the word of God, but the Constitution is that thing that puts government and people and entities into check. And so we got to go back. And I encourage you, the listener, do your homework. I can only talk about it in a very constrained time on my radio show. And if you tuned in on a regular basis, then you get to hear this quite often. And so for some people, you'll start learning this if you hang in there with me. But even still, after the radio show goes off and you go back to your day, when you got some downtime, pull up. If you'll just start with the Bill of Rights, that is a great start. Start with the Bill of Rights. And I promise you, it's like someone handed you a key to one shackle every amendment that you read. Let's read. Fifth Amendment. No person, that means you or your neighbor, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. What is an infamous crime? We've talked about this. An infamous crime is a felony. Unless, so you can't be held to answer for a felony charge, anything that would land you in jail for over a year, unless on a presentment or an indictment of a grand jury, meaning you've had your day in court. Except in the cases of land or naval forces. So this doesn't count for the average citizen because you're not in the military or in the militia. If you don't belong in the militia, that does not apply to you, the citizen. Or when in actual service in a time of war or public danger, none of that is going on. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense twice or be put in jeopardy of life or limb. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. They are compelling people who are innocent to plead guilty just so they can go home. That is unconstitutional. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. But let's look at just that one last line before we finish this one. Nor be deprived of life, meaning your freedom, life, your average daily affairs, liberty, meaning your freedom, your property, meaning your home, your car, and your stuff, without due process. Meaning, if we go back to the beginning, due process means that I've had my day in court. I've gathered all the evidence. I know who's accused me. We're going to talk about that in the Sixth Amendment just here in a second. Without due process, this is unconstitutional to have innocent people. Innocent people. And everybody's innocent until they've had their day in court. It doesn't matter what charges. If they've been charged with eating 5 people, unless somebody has proven that before a grand jury and a jury has given them an indictment, then if they're indicted or a grand jury has been compelled by evidence that they're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the only reason that a person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property. Every last listener, person who will see this video, hear this broadcast, we should be flooding calls to the governor, the mayor, the county mayor, the city mayor, the sheriff, who's responsible for the prison, because this is unconstitutional. And there's only 2 things that is stated in the Constitution twice, and that's due process. We are preventing people, and this is intentional, so people will plead guilty. So let's look at the Sixth Amendment. And remember, after this broadcast is done, go back home and look at the Bill of Rights. Okay? That's a good place to start, the Bill of Rights. The Sixth Amendment states that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused, which may be you or a loved one, shall enjoy the right to a speedy public trial by an impartial jury, meaning people who understand you, people from the neighborhoods that you're from, people who've been in your shoes and walked a mile in your neighborhood, people who resemble your circumstances. Because it's hard to be impartial if you can't relate to an individual. It's hard to be impartial. An impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So that means that really, if I committed some crimes, there should be some people, even if they may not, let's say I committed a crime in the South Side. Well, if you know anything about Chattanooga, the West Side looks like the impoverished parts of the South Side. Boone Heights looks like in Cromwell. I mean, I can go on and on and on. It's several different. So even if they didn't get people who knew me, they can go to other impoverished neighborhoods and find people who could understand maybe why I even committed the crime in the first place. Which district shall have been previously ascertained by law and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation to be confronted with the witnesses against him or her, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his or her favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his or her defense. When Mike Steele called and talked about due process, this is a breaking down of what due process looks like. Means that you should have an impartial jury. It shouldn't take the courts. And see, this is the thing. If we're arresting so many people to where the courts can't process them all, there's a problem. If we got to hold them in jail because they're too poor, there's a problem. All of this is unconstitutional. Because if it says that I shall enjoy, we got to look at this language. I shall enjoy the right to a speedy trial. It's no reason why I should wait 1, 2, 3 years. 3 years to finally go to court. I have a life to live. I have children to raise. I have a job to work, a business to run. I might be in school, volunteering. There's so many things I have to do. And when we go back to that Fifth Amendment, it says that we're not supposed to have people rob us of life, liberty, and property without due process, meaning that we've gone through this already. And so if I have not had time to prepare a defense, if I have not had time to know who my accusers are, if I have not had time to gather witnesses, if I had not had time to try to find legal counsel or to get the information required to represent myself, if I so choose, why am I in prison in the first place? If I look at the Eighth Amendment and said excessive bail shall not be required. Well, if it says that, if I have bail that's beyond my means of paying, that's just like people who don't have a driver's license because they're too poor to pay for fines. I'm trying to tap into David right here, Title 55. We just had a federal judge this year determine that people should not be prevented from having a driver's license just because they have court costs that are beyond reasonable means of paying them. They'll never be able to pay them off, so they can't have a driver's license. It's ridiculous. When these laws were written, we didn't have to have driver's license to move about in the first place. What does the statute say? What does the law say? What does the Tennessee state constitution say? What does the federal constitution say? We got to go. So my grandmother would say, sometimes we got to hold on to the old time way. Sometimes we got to go back to where we started. In some instances, we do need to go back to where we started from and never stray. Everything doesn't need to be improved upon. There are some things out there that are just fine. The Constitution is just that. It says what it says. It's not up for debate. It shouldn't be up for debate. It shouldn't be open to interpretation. It says what it says. And it says what it says in the best interest of everybody who's listening and even those who are not. And so the biggest right that an inmate has is the right to ensure that they can do the best that they can to go back home. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Talk to me.
Marie, for one to believe the government has the authority to tell you you can or can't travel, tantamounts to tyranny. Your right to travel is absolute. And the courts have ruled that. If you read that from the 1920s and 30s, when they were trying to get cars off the road because they were spooking the horses, the courts ruled that it's an absolute right to travel. This is pure tyranny. And they try to get Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives pitted against each other on the national level when tyranny comes right in your back door. Mm-hmm. And it's right out your back door. Remember, too, there are 5 pleas as a matter of due process. Guilty, not guilty, no contendere, which is no contest, double jeopardy, which means they're charging you with the same crime twice, and then standing mute on the plea. And that's what Christ did. When they charge you, you say, I stand mute on the plea and challenge your jurisdiction to judge me. because you have no authority over me. That's a heavy, heavy plea of standing mute. You're doing a great job. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you. I'm trying my absolute best. And why? Because I think if I asked a simple question, and I thought about asking it last night and I didn't, how many of us know somebody that's ever been arrested, or how many of us know someone that's ever gone to prison? I'm sure that if not everybody in the room could raise their hand, that probably 95% of the people can, regardless of age, regardless of race. Why? Because whether we want to admit it or not, and often when you try to talk about things like this, people consider you a conspiracy theorist, crazy, a lunatic. Well, if you say that I'm crazy, maybe I am. I'm crazy enough to read, number one. Crazy enough to learn, number two. And crazy enough to believe that when God made me, He didn't intend for me to be subject to any form of slavery, whether it's slavery for economic gain or whether it's slavery for just holding my head down, feeling within me that maybe what I'm doing is not right, that maybe what I'm doing doesn't feel right. Maybe that I say that I'm free, but in almost every way that I live, it don't really feel like that. Maybe I'm crazy enough to research is what I'm subject to really the truth. I've talked about it when I talked about constitutional money. A lot of us, if we weren't born before 1963, we don't know that we could exchange actual dollars for pieces of silver, because that is actual constitutional money, and that fiat currency is illegal. You wouldn't believe me if you didn't read. You wouldn't believe me. You wouldn't believe that all of these felonies that our system has come up with in the first place, that there's only 3 constitutional felonies to begin with. Maybe I'm ahead of my time, but that's okay. I'm going to catch the rest of the world up if you keep on listening to the Mott Show. Know Your Rights Fridays. Prisoners have rights. They have rights. And we better start standing up for one another. Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free. Well, she said, ain't nobody free unless we're all free. And so if not everybody is free, we got much work to do. If no one is taking the time to tell you that they love you today, I love you. And guess what? It's nothing that you can do about it.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
An inmate dies in custody. Officials say 54-year-old Carl Gray III was in jail on DUI charges. Shortly after booking, other inmates alerted guards that something was wrong. Deputies found him unresponsive in his cell. They performed CPR in an effort to